"You're just trying to make me feel guilty." That's what she said to me. Cold. Flat. Like I'd rehearsed the line for her. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't grabbed the bottle from her hand or locked the fridge or torn through her phone, looking for the names of the kids who handed her cheap vodka in Snapple bottles. I didn't even raise my voice. I just reminded her, like I always had, that there's no drinking in this house. That had been the rule since day one, since before she knew what alcohol even was. Becky was 17. Almost grown, she liked to say. I had no fight left that night, and I didn't want one. But what she gave me, those 5 words, they weren't rebellion. They were something worse. "You're just trying to make me feel guilty." Guilt. As if that's what love had become in her eyes. Guilt, not guidance. Control, not care. Presence, not parenting. I remember standing at the edge of the kitchen island. The overhead light flickering in that stupid way it always had. I'd meant to fix it, same as the door handle on her bathroom, the missing knob on the cabinet, the busted drawer where she kept her journals. Little things. Quiet maintenance. Like all the other invisible acts I performed. She was already halfway up the stairs, tote bag swinging. I could hear the soft clink of glass inside. Bottles probably half full. The sound of risk. She didn't say goodnight, and I didn't ask where she was going. I stared at the space she'd just vacated. Not at the mess she left behind, water ring on the counter, discarded soda can, but at the empty air that still seemed full of her dismissal. That's when I decided, quietly and finally, that the next time she needed someone, I wouldn't answer. Not because I didn't care, but because caring had been rebranded as a crime. My name is Tom. I'm 44. I live just outside Milwaukee, run my own HVAC repair business. Blue collar to the bone. I know the price of Freon. I know how to silence a noisy vent. And I know now what it feels like to be erased in your own home. When I married Linda, Becky was 9 years old. Shy. Small. Bookish. The kind of girl who'd hold her mom's hand at the grocery store and read every cereal box out loud. She used to hum when she read, like the words needed a soundtrack. Her biological dad, Rick, was the human equivalent of a sugar rush. He'd show up twice a month, sometimes 3. Big grin, big promises, big gifts. Left just as fast. The man had the emotional attention span of a Snapchat streak. But he knew how to make her laugh. And I knew how to pay for braces. You can guess which one stuck longer in her memory. I never tried to replace him. That's the truth. I never wanted the dad title unless she gave it. All I did was step in. Where there was a gap, I filled it. Not with speeches or grand gestures, but with rides to doctor's appointments, science fair displays on trifold boards at 2 a.m., and forgotten permission slips filled out with my own last name. Nobody clapped. Nobody noticed. I didn't expect them to. I was the structure, not the story. Linda, bless her, said she appreciated me. Said I was the rock. But rocks don't get birthday cards. They don't get hugs in the hallway or a seat at the father-daughter dance. I remember standing at the school gym entrance that night, Becky in a pink dress, scanning the crowd with an expression that broke something in me when she whispered, "It's okay. We don't have to go in. He's not coming." And I said I'd go with her. I offered. Even wore a tie. But she shook her head. "You're not my real dad." And that was that. Years went by. Slowly, then all at once. 9 became 11, then 13. The giggles faded. The books got darker. And the silence between us stretched into something permanent. I became the background hum of her teenage years. Constant, unnoticed, easy to ignore. But I kept doing it. Every morning school drop-off. Every recital. Every text to check if she got home safe. Every little thing I'd have done if she'd shared my blood. Because I believed the years would stack up into something unshakable. Something that couldn't be rewritten by one bad night or one cruel phrase. I was wrong. What I saw as a wall we'd been building together. She saw as a cage I'd constructed around her. By the time she turned 16, every rule was an attack. Every question a trap. Every expectation a form of tyranny. I didn't have the language to navigate it. I just had work boots, a coffee thermos, and a slow-burning patience I thought would be enough. It wasn't. The shift came so gradually I didn't even notice the moment she stopped seeing me as safe. It was in the little things. The way she'd flinch when I knocked on her door. The way she'd roll her eyes when I reminded her about curfew. The way she'd speak around me, never to me. Always waiting for Linda to translate my rules like I was some foreign body she had to tolerate. I'd watch her on her phone, texting faster than most people could think, and wonder, was she telling someone about me? Was I a joke in her group chat? The overbearing stepdad. HVAC guy who thinks he's father of the year. There was one night, I'll never forget it, when I came home late, head pounding from a furnace job that went sideways. I walked into the kitchen and found Becky and Linda whispering, laughing, her with a glass in her hand. Wine, red. The smell hit me before the sight did. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table or shame her. I said, "You know the rule." She looked at me like I was some museum relic, some old thing she didn't know why we still had. "That's your rule," she said, "not mine." And then she turned to Linda, and Linda didn't say anything. You can't be a father if the people around you keep treating you like a bouncer. I was the rulebook, the curfew, the brake pedal. And the more I tried to keep her safe, the more she framed it as control, as manipulation, as guilt. So I stopped. Not dramatically. Not in a blaze of fury or a midnight speech. I just stopped reminding her to eat before practice. I stopped texting, "Let me know when you get there." I stopped answering when she asked me for gas money, phone plan upgrades, or lift rides when her own father flaked. I stopped being the one who caught her when she fell. Because if I wasn't her real dad, I wasn't her real emergency contact either. That's what I told myself, over and over, like a mantra, like a survival instinct. It's strange, isn't it? You can spend a decade laying bricks, and someone else can knock them down with 5 words. "You're just trying to make me feel guilty." She said it like it was the worst sin a man could commit. Caring, trying, being there. I went to bed that night with the hum of the old refrigerator in my ears. That, and the echo of a house where every sacrifice had been reduced to control. Where every line I drew to protect her was just another reason to resent me. That was the night I stopped parenting. That was the night I became a landlord. Because if my love looked like control, then maybe freedom would teach her what love actually costs. Started with a new job. Some hip little cafe downtown. Cold brew in mason jars, art on the walls, playlists that sounded like cigarette smoke and heartbreak. Becky got hired as a barista there after graduation. She was 17 but dressed 25, apron slung over her shoulder like a statement. The place had charm, I'll give it that, and it gave her something else, too. A new circle. Suddenly, her old friends, the ones who used to spend Saturdays painting posters for the school dance, were gone. Replaced overnight by college kids with lip rings and vape pens and that dangerous confidence that comes from making every mistake once and surviving it. They talked like adults, drank like it was sport. One of them called me sir the first time I picked Becky up after her shift, then snorted when I told him I was her stepdad. Like that explained everything. Friday nights turned unpredictable. She'd come home past curfew or not at all. Sometimes we'd hear her stumble in around 2 in the morning, whispering, giggling, tripping over her shoes. I'd wait up without meaning to, heart pounding like it was trying to warn me. But I didn't say anything. Not at first. I told myself she was testing limits. That it would pass. That every daughter walks the tightrope between rebellion and return. Then came the night I couldn't ignore. It was nearly midnight when I heard the voices. I was sitting on the couch, trying to finish invoices, when I heard the front door creak open, too slow, too careful. Then came the giggling, the unmistakable clink of bottles. 3 shadows moved through the hallway, 2 girls, 1 guy, all around Becky's age, none of them familiar. One of them said, "Shoo, her stepdad's weird about drinking." And they all laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I didn't move right away. I just sat there, back straight, fingers on the keyboard, letting it all wash over me. The fridge opened. The island stools scraped against tile. A bottle cracked open. Vodka by the sound of it, something cheap and plastic and flammable. I rose slowly. No anger in my bones. Just a deep, settling clarity. I walked into the kitchen. They froze. The guy had one arm draped around the girl sitting on the counter. The other girl, Becky, stood near the sink with a red Solo cup in her hand. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in months, she didn't look defiant. She looked startled, like she forgot I existed. I didn't yell. I didn't shame. I just said, "No drinking in this house." Her shoulders stiffened. "We're not driving anywhere." "I don't care," I said. "It's not a debate. It's the rule." She scoffed. "God, you're so controlling." The guy snickered. And that was it. That word. That nail. Controlling. I had been called a lot of things in my life, but never by someone I carried. Linda came down a few minutes later, wrapped in a robe, eyes heavy with sleep and avoidance. She looked at the scene and sighed. "Tom," she said gently, "maybe just one drink. They're safe. They're home." I looked at her, and I saw it clearly for the first time. Not fatigue, not compromise, but betrayal. She wasn't parenting with me. She was pacifying everyone, keeping the peace by sacrificing the person who made peace possible. That night, I stopped being the enforcer. I stopped being the fallback. I became a ghost. The next morning, Becky said she was moving out. Said her dad had space in his apartment. Said he didn't freak out over White Claw. I nodded. Told her it was her choice. She misread my calm for permission. Smirked. "You act like I need your approval." I replied without blinking, "If you live under this roof, you follow the rules." That's when it came. The sentence. That final blow. "You're not even my real dad. You don't get to control my life." She didn't yell it. She just said it. Like it was math. Like it had been waiting on the tip of her tongue for years. I stood in the silence after, breathing through my nose, every nerve in my body going cold. And then I made the list. Not in front of her. Not in anger. Just a mental list of everything she depended on me for. Every line I had signed. Every bill I had covered. Every system that made her life run smoothly. Phone plan. Car insurance. Emergency contact for school. Emergency contact for the clinic. Bank account routing for college deposits. Netflix. Spotify. Uber. I let her finish her breakfast in silence. Then I went to my desk and logged into every system I'd set up for her. First, I canceled the family phone line that carried her number. Then I removed her from my car insurance policy. I called the university and updated the emergency contact information. Removed my name. Logged into the joint bank account. Removed my access. Closed the backup card. Changed the Netflix password. Revoked the Spotify family plan. Not out of spite, but out of truth. If I wasn't her real dad, then I wasn't her real safety net either. I didn't tell Linda. I didn't need to. The silence between us was already loud enough. That night, we ate dinner in separate rooms. Her in the kitchen. Me at the workbench in the garage, polishing the same wrench for over an hour. There's a line a man crosses not when he gets angry, but when he stops trying. I had crossed it. The next day, Becky packed her things into 2 duffel bags and slammed the front door without a goodbye. She left behind a pair of shoes, a hoodie, and the scent of alcohol still lingering in the couch cushions. Linda didn't speak much that weekend. Neither did I. We both knew what had been broken. We just hadn't admitted it had never fully worked. A week passed. No texts, no calls, no apologies. And then, just after 1:40 a.m. on a Saturday, my phone buzzed. It was Becky. "Hey, can you come get me? My ride ditched me and I'm kinda drunk. I don't feel safe." I sat up in bed, stared at the message. The screen glowed like a confession. My first instinct was to grab the keys. My second was to remember who she said I was not. I forwarded the message to the family group chat. Short, clean. "Rick, Linda. Becky's trying to reach me. Reminder. I'm no longer her emergency contact." Rick replied in under a minute. "Got it. Heading out." I silenced my phone, laid back down, and went to sleep. At 3:50 a.m. The front door opened. Becky stumbled inside. She wasn't alone. A male voice snapped. Seriously? Your dad calls me at 2 a.m. And you're too drunk to even get in the car? Becky's voice slurred. I called Tom first. He didn't answer. You said he's not your dad, the guy growled. I'm not doing this again. Get your life together. The door slammed. Footsteps. Silence. I sat in the dark on the couch, unseen, listening, not moving, letting her feel what absence really meant. The next morning, she walked into the kitchen like a ghost. Sunglasses on, hoodie tight, voice low. You didn't answer, she whispered. I poured coffee, took a sip. Good morning. She didn't flinch, just stared at the floor. I called you 6 times. I looked at her, calm, measured. And you made it clear, I said. I'm not your dad, so I'm not your emergency either. She didn't respond. I used to show up, I continued. That's why I had the rule, so this wouldn't happen. But you called it controlling, so I stopped. She looked wrecked, but I didn't comfort her, because this was the lesson, not a punishment, a consequence. She walked away without another word. But something shifted that morning, and not just in her, in me. I realized I'd spent too many years being a version of a father she never asked for and never respected. So I stepped back, fully, not to teach her a lesson, but because I was done giving unearned rescue. It didn't happen all at once. Regret rarely does. It starts with a glance that lingers too long, a word you expect but don't hear, a silence where comfort used to be. At first, she tried to pretend the moment had passed, that we'd go back to normal, that I'd forget the things she said. The problem was, there was no normal to return to. The day after I didn't pick her up, Becky spent most of it in her room. Lights off, curtains drawn. The whole house tense with something unspoken. Linda asked how she was feeling. Becky mumbled something about being tired. Just a headache. But she didn't come down for lunch. Didn't text. Didn't ask for anything. I noticed because I was watching, but not like before. Not out of concern. Out of curiosity. I wanted to see how long it would take her to understand that the safety net wasn't just sagging. It was gone. Took exactly 48 hours. Monday afternoon. I was in the garage, sorting tools, trying to keep my hands busy, when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Not the usual stomping. Not the careless thud of someone who assumed the house would always catch them. This was slower, hesitant. A knock on the garage door. Soft. Hey, she said, poking her head in. Can I talk to you for a second? I kept wiping down a wrench, deliberately slow. She stepped in, arms folded across her chest, sweater sleeves tugged over her hands like a kid trying to shrink. She looked small, not like a teenager full of fury, not like the girl who once called me a dictator for enforcing curfew. Just a tired, scared kid trying to stand still in a world that had suddenly tilted sideways. I updated my emergency contact, she said. I didn't turn. At school, she continued. At the doctor's office too. I put your name back. Told Mom. I haven't had a drink since that night. I nodded once. Okay. Her voice cracked. Not because you told me to. I didn't like how that felt. Being alone like that. I didn't like who I was. I set the wrench down. Looked at her for the first time. But that's the version you defended. That's who you protected when you said I was controlling. She didn't answer. I didn't stop caring, Becky, I said. I stopped intervening. That's different. I stopped stepping in when you spit on the hands that reached for you. She blinked fast. I was scared. I know, I said. That's why I used to answer. Her lip trembled. Why didn't you that night? Because you said I wasn't your dad. So I listened, and I acted like it was true. She took a breath. Shaky. Are you still mad at me? No, I said. I'm past that. This isn't about anger anymore. It's about limits. I walked past her to the workbench, picked up a rag, cleaned my hands. You put my name back on the contact list. Good. But understand this, changing forms doesn't change respect. If you end up drunk at 2 a.m. Again, I might still not answer. Not to be cruel. Just to be consistent. She nodded. Slowly. I get it. Do you? I asked. Because here's the truth. I can't save you if you won't let me protect you. And I won't die trying to help someone who's actively pushing me away. Silence. Then she whispered it. I'm sorry I said you weren't my dad. I looked at her carefully. You were right. I'm not. Not biologically. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. But being a dad isn't about blood. It's about showing up. And I did. I showed up. For 10 years. I carried what your real dad dropped. And when I asked for boundaries, you called it control. When I cared too loudly, you said I was manipulative. So I stopped. Not to teach you a lesson. To protect myself. She looked down. I know. I didn't mean it. I was just mad. Doesn't matter, I said. Intentions don't erase consequences. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just nodded. Quiet. Sober in more ways than one. And then she left the garage. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of water and no appetite. Linda joined me after the sun dipped behind the trees. She didn't say anything at first, just folded herself into the chair beside mine, pulling her sweater close like it could protect her from the truth. She told me what you said, she whispered. I didn't respond. She's shaken. I think it finally landed. Good, I said. Linda sighed. I hate how far things had to go. They went there because no one backed me up, I replied. You called it keeping peace. What it really did was teach her my voice was optional. She stared ahead. I stood alone in this house, I said, and I kept standing until I fell silent. And now she listens because the silence scared her. Linda didn't defend herself. She just sat there, eyes glossy, hands knotted in her lap. I didn't press. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was too tired for that. What I needed was what I finally had. Distance. Boundaries. Space to stop bleeding. In the days that followed, things shifted. Becky didn't try to fix it all at once. She didn't suddenly become obedient or affectionate. But the sharp edges dulled. I'd hear her say, thank you. When I fixed the laundry door, she always used to slam. I noticed she didn't leave dishes in the sink anymore. She picked up after herself. Spoke softer. Asked instead of demanded. One night, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. No, we can't drink at my place, she said. My stepdad's not cool with it. No sarcasm. No venom. Just a fact. I sat in the hallway, just for a second. Listening. It didn't fix anything. But it meant something. A week later, she knocked on my office door. Asked if I had time to help her look over a college form. Not a big thing. Not dramatic. But the kind of request that assumes respect. The kind of ask you don't make of someone you see as a tyrant. I agreed. She sat quietly, listened, took notes. When we were done, she hesitated in the doorway. Can I ask something? I looked up. Do you still think of me? Like your daughter? I leaned back. I don't think about it in titles anymore. I think about it in choices. And I choose to help you when you treat me like someone worth helping. She nodded. Slowly. Okay. Okay. I echoed. She left. And I finally exhaled. It's not a happy ending. Not some neat ribbon-wrapped reconciliation. She still gets short with me. I still keep a little distance. Linda and I started couples therapy, because too many nights she stood behind silence when she should have stood beside me. But one thing is permanent. My boundaries aren't up for debate anymore. If you call love control long enough, if you confuse rules for oppression, if you push away the hand that steadies you, eventually that hand pulls back, and the fall becomes your own. There's a myth people love to believe, that time heals, that words said in anger can be erased, that eventually the family bond overrides the damage done. I used to think like that too. Thought I was just one apology away from reclaiming everything I poured into this house. But what they don't tell you is this. Sometimes, when the shouting stops, the silence doesn't bring peace. It just confirms the distance. That's what happened here. Not a blow-up. Not an ugly ending. Just a quiet correction. A shift in gravity. The center of this house moved. And I moved with it. Becky stayed. Physically, at least. She didn't run off to Rick's. Probably because he didn't offer. He never does. But something between us changed shape. Not in some dramatic way. She still calls me Tom. Still closes her door a little too hard when she's frustrated. Still forgets to turn off the hallway light. But she also asks before inviting people over. She thanks me when I fix things. She texts if she's going to be late. She shows up for dinner, even if she scrolls through her phone half the time. These sound like crumbs. Maybe they are. But when you've lived in a home where your voice was treated like static, even crumbs feel like a feast. The truth? I don't trust it yet. It's not bitterness. It's just restraint. Like walking across thin ice after a thaw. I gave everything once. I gave it blindly, with the naive faith that love, over time, becomes undeniable. That if you keep showing up, eventually the people you show up for will meet you halfway. I learned that's not always true. Sometimes all they learn is that you'll show up no matter what. That you'll answer even when they spit on your name. That you'll pay even when they call you a stranger. And when they figure that out, they stop seeing you as a person. You become a fixture. A faucet. A brake pedal. A safety valve. Not a father. Not even a man. Just the thing that fixes what breaks and quietly absorbs the rest. Linda started therapy first. On her own. She said it was to deal with the stress, but I think some part of her finally admitted what I'd known all along. That she didn't know how to defend me without feeling like she was betraying her daughter. She never said it outright. But it was in the way she looked at me that night. Becky called me controlling and Linda said nothing. Silence is a choice. And in that moment, she chose comfort over confrontation. That kind of silence stacks, layer by layer, until the weight of what's unsaid crushes what you tried to build. Now, we go to couples counseling once a week. The therapist asks questions like, "When did you stop feeling like a team?" And Linda shifts uncomfortably in her chair, staring at her hands. I don't need a therapist to answer that. It was the night she asked me to compromise on the drinking rule. Like my years of parenting were negotiable. Like I was just another guest in my own house. Someone whose presence was helpful, until it made people uncomfortable. That was the night I knew. I'd been living in a home that didn't see me as a father, just a helper, a bystander with a credit card. And I was done. The hardest part wasn't letting go of the role. It was realizing the role was never mine to begin with. I just held it like a man clinging to a title no one else believed in. That kind of clarity doesn't bring relief. It brings grief. But grief is honest. And I'll take that over illusion any day. 3 weeks ago, Becky came home with paperwork for college housing. She hovered at the threshold of my office, eyes scanning the floor. "I don't want to live on campus," she said. "Too loud. Too expensive. I was wondering if I could stay here and just commute." I didn't say yes. Not immediately. I asked questions. How would she contribute to the house? How would she handle curfews, boundaries, rules? What would she do if Rick suddenly called and invited her to stay with him instead? She answered them all. Clearly. Thoughtfully. She even said, "Your house, your rules." That phrase hung in the air longer than anything else. Not because it was dramatic, but because for the first time she said it without sarcasm, without rolling her eyes, without the bitterness she used to lace into every syllable. Just fact. I told her she could stay, but I also told her this wasn't a reset. "This isn't about you earning back a dad," I said. "I'm not offering that anymore. That's something you either gave to me or you didn't. I'm offering you a roof. And the chance to prove respect exists here again. That's it." She nodded. "I understand." And you know what? I think she did. There's no photo of the three of us in the hallway. Not because I don't want one, but because no one ever suggested it. And I got tired of framing memories alone. There's still a picture of Becky and Rick on the fridge. Some vacation he took her on 3 years ago. They're at a beach, both smiling. He has sunglasses on. She's got a coconut drink in her hand. Linda won't take it down. She says it's important for Becky to have reminders of where she came from. But what about where she stayed? What about the man who fixed her brakes at midnight? Who took off work to drive her to the ER when she cut her hand on a glass in the sink? Who worked double shifts to keep the lights on when Rick missed another child support payment? There's no picture for that. Just memory. And mine is long. People love to ask the wrong questions. Isn't it worth it, Tom? Even if she only realizes it now. Don't you feel proud that she came back to you for help? Doesn't it feel like you won? No, I didn't win. Because there was no game. There was just a man who showed up every day hoping that would be enough. And there was a girl who waited until everything broke to admit it might have mattered. That's not victory. That's survival. I don't need Becky to call me Dad. I never did. What I needed was to not be treated like a placeholder. Like a backup plan with a wallet. Now I give less. Not out of spite. Out of wisdom. I answer when I want to. I help when it's deserved. And I no longer confuse obligation with love. Linda notices. She asks if I'll ever fully trust them again. I tell her I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But I know this. Love without boundaries becomes servitude. And I won't serve in a home that doesn't recognize the cost of my loyalty. So now I sit here, late at night, the house quiet again. Becky asleep upstairs. Linda in the other room. And me writing this. Not for revenge. Not for praise. But because I need to say it. I was there. I mattered. Even when they pretended I didn't. And now I'll ask the question I've asked myself every day since she called me controlling. Was I wrong? Was I wrong to pull back when all I asked for was respect? Was I wrong to let them feel the consequences of their own dismissal? Was I cruel for finally treating my care like a choice, not a contract? Or was this the only way left to survive a house that called my love a burden? You tell me, if you had given 10 years to someone who called you nothing, would you have stayed?